The story that went viral was clean, dramatic, and completely wrong. Four-time MVP A'ja Wilson, the most decorated player in women's basketball right now, had allegedly been yanked from Team USA's World Cup roster after an explosive blow-up with rookie sensation Caitlin Clark. It spread fast. Comment sections erupted. Fans picked sides. Sports pages ran with it. There was just one problem. USA Basketball's own official roster announcement, dated August 6, 2026, lists both of their names, together, on the same team. No removal, no blow-up on record, no drama behind closed doors. The rumor was fiction. But the real story underneath it, the one involving a single comment made 10 months ago, 10 months of silence that followed, and two of the most talked about players in women's sports now sharing a jersey heading into Berlin, that story is worth telling properly. Because the truth is more complicated, more interesting, and more revealing than anything the rumor ever was. On the morning of August 6th, USA Basketball Managing Director Sue Bird walked in front of cameras on NBC's Today Show and read out 12 names. Those 12 players would represent the United States at the 2026 FIBA Women's World Cup, held in Berlin, Germany from September 4th through September 13th. The full roster: Aaliyah Boston, Paige Buchers, Caitlin Clark, Napheesa Collier, Kahleah Copper, Chelsea Gray, Ryan Howard, Kelsey Klum, Angel Reese, Breanna Stewart, A'ja Wilson, and Jackie Young. 7 of those 12 would be making their World Cup debuts, a generational handoff happening in real time, right alongside a core of veterans who had already won at this level before. The announcement itself was, by any standard, a basketball story first. A dominant program adding new pieces around a proven foundation, heading into a tournament they have owned for over a decade. Team USA enters Berlin having won 9 of the last 12 World Cups, including 4 in a row, and 8 consecutive Olympic gold medals without a single loss. The Americans are, by every measurable standard, the most successful program in the history of the sport. Whatever names were going to be called that morning were always going to carry that weight behind them. But 2 of those names carried something extra, and the moment both were confirmed, the internet didn't ask about Berlin, it asked about October. To understand why Wilson and Clark sharing a roster became a headline at all, you have to go back to where both of them were before any of this started, because neither path to this roster was a straight line. Wilson's case was the easier one to make. In the 2022 World Cup, she was the engine of a gold medal run, 17.2 points and 7.5 rebounds per game, tournament MVP honors, and a performance that locked her in as the centerpiece of every national team conversation since. In the years that followed, she added 2 more WNBA championships and 2 more WNBA Most Valuable Player awards to a resume that already placed her among the defining players in the sport's history. This season, in WNBA play, she ranks among the league's elite, bringing the same combination of interior dominance, footwork, and physicality that international defenses have never found a clean answer for. Her selection wasn't a question, it was a formality dressed up as an announcement. Clark's path looked nothing like that. In 2024, she was left off the Olympic roster entirely, a contentious decision at the time, but a defensible one. She had logged only 12 WNBA appearances by that point in her rookie season and was still adjusting to the professional game at the highest level. Then 2025 brought further setbacks. A groin strain followed by a bone bruise in her ankle limited her to just 13 games, in which she averaged 16.5 points, 8.8 assists, and 5 rebounds before being shut down for the remainder of the year. For a player who had arrived in the league carrying more attention than any women's basketball player in recent memory, 2025 was a humbling, frustrating, and very public struggle. What changed the conversation was March of 2026. In the World Cup qualifying tournament in Puerto Rico, Clark was named tournament MVP, averaging 11.6 points and the tournament best 6.4 assists per game, as the Americans went a perfect 5-0, defeating Cuba, Puerto Rico, Italy, New Zealand, and Spain. That tournament marked the first time Clark, Buchers, and Reese had represented the senior national team as professionals. And Clark's performance in Puerto Rico wasn't just good, it was a direct answer to every question about whether she had recovered, whether she had grown, and whether she had earned a place on this roster. Nothing about her inclusion required a controversy to explain it. She played her way onto this team on her own terms. The two tracks, Wilson's sustained dominance and Clark's interrupted rise, ran entirely separately from each other, and both converged on the same 12-person roster for reasons that had nothing to do with the comment that was about to make them impossible to talk about individually. October 2025. Wilson had just been named Time magazine's Athlete of the Year, a recognition that placed her alongside the most celebrated figures in global sports for that calendar year. In the feature profile that accompanied the honor, journalist Shaw Wilkins included a comment from Wilson that referenced the league's current moment without naming anyone directly. "It was more so, let's not lose the recipe," Wilson said. "Let's not lose the history. It was erased for a minute, and I don't like that because we have tons of women that have been through the grittiest of grimy things to get the league where it is today." She did not say Clark's name. She did not accuse Clark of anything specific. She did not frame it as a personal grievance aimed at a single player, but the timing was impossible to separate from context. Clark had just come off a rookie season that generated record ratings, sold-out arenas across the league, and national television coverage on a scale women's basketball had never seen before. A significant portion of veteran players and longtime fans had spent that entire season wrestling with a very real tension. How do you welcome transformative new attention to a sport while making sure the players who built it before that attention arrived don't get quietly written out of the story? Wilson's comment landed inside that tension, and her fan base's reaction turned what was framed as a general observation about league history into a headline aimed squarely at one person. The blowback was immediate. Clark's fan base pushed back hard, questioning why Clark needed to be referenced at all if she wasn't being named directly. Wilson stood behind the substance of what she had said, while pushing back on how it had been characterized in the days that followed. Neither player addressed the other by name, and then for 10 months, both of them went largely quiet on the subject. It is worth being precise here, because precision is exactly where most versions of this story fall apart. Wilson's comment was about historical credit and the risk of erasure. That conversation had already been happening across the league in different forms, raised by multiple veteran players in the years surrounding Clark's rise. It was not on its face a personal attack on a single rookie. What transformed a general point about league history into a story framed around two specific individuals was the size of the platform it was made on and the size and intensity of the fan base reading it. That distinction matters for everything that follows. 10 months passed between that October comment and the August roster announcement, and in those 10 months, the record between Wilson and Clark shows something that tends to get buried under the noise: a sustained, consistent, almost deliberate silence from both sides. But silence alone doesn't tell the whole story. There are 3 specific moments from that period that complicate any simple version of the narrative, and none of them get mentioned nearly as often as the original comment does. The first one actually predates the comment entirely. In July of 2025, 3 months before the erased remark ever made headlines, the NBWA held its All-Star Game. That year, the league split its rosters by fan vote rather than conference alignment, with 2 team captains headlining separate squads. Wilson and Clark were not placed on opposing sides as symbolic rivals. They were teammates,
both selected for Team Clark, both photographed reacting from the same bench in the fourth quarter. They shared a sideline, a team name, and a game, months before the comment that would later lead millions of people to assume they had been at odds from the beginning. The record shows the opposite happened first. The second data point came in January of 2026. Wilson was photographed courtside at a Miami Heat game, there to support her boyfriend, Bam Adebayo, an evening that had nothing to do with the NBWA, Team USA, or Caitlin Clark in any way. A Clark jersey happened to be visible on a fan seated nearby in the crowd. Several outlets picked up the image and ran it as an ironic reminder that Wilson couldn't fully escape Clark's presence, even at an unrelated event, in a different city, in a different league, months removed from any basketball storyline connecting them. That framing belonged entirely to the outlets that published it. Wilson made no comment, offered no reaction, and there is no record of her acknowledging the moment at all. If anything, that episode reveals more about how eager parts of the media were to keep the erased narrative alive than it reveals about anything Wilson actually felt that night. 10 months passed between that October comment and the August roster announcement, and in those 10 months, the record between Wilson and Clark shows something that tends to get buried under the noise: a sustained, consistent, almost deliberate silence from both sides. But silence alone doesn't tell the whole story. There are 3 specific moments from that period that complicate any simple version of the narrative, and none of them get mentioned nearly as often as the original comment does. The first one actually predates the comment entirely. In July of 2025, 3 months before the erased remark ever made headlines, the NBWA held its All-Star game. That year, the league split its rosters by fan vote rather than conference alignment, with 2 team captains headlining separate squads. Wilson and Clark were not placed on opposing sides as symbolic rivals. They were teammates, both selected for Team Clark, both photographed reacting from the same bench in the fourth quarter. They shared a sideline, a team name, and a game, months before the comment that would later lead millions of people to assume they had been at odds from the beginning. The record shows the opposite happened first. The second data point came in January of 2026. Wilson was photographed courtside at a Miami Heat game, there to support her boyfriend, Bam Adebayo, an evening that had nothing to do with the NBWA, Team USA, or Caitlin Clark in any way. A Clark jersey happened to be visible on a fan seated nearby in the crowd. Several outlets picked up the image and ran it as an ironic reminder that Wilson couldn't fully escape Clark's presence, even at an unrelated event, in a different city, in a different league, months removed from any basketball storyline connecting them. That framing belonged entirely to the outlets that published it. Wilson made no comment, offered no reaction, and there is no record of her acknowledging the moment at all. If anything, that episode reveals more about how eager parts of the media were to keep the erased narrative alive than it reveals about anything Wilson actually felt that night.
The third data point arrived on August 8th, 2 days after the World Cup roster was announced, when Wilson spoke to reporters at a press availability covering the full team. She talked about the tournament, the honor of competing for gold, the experience of past championship runs. Her comments were measured, team-focused, and delivered in the same professional tone she has used for national team media throughout her career. What they did not contain is, in its own way, just as significant as what they did. No reference to Clark by name or implication, no acknowledgement, positive or negative, of a dynamic that outside observers had spent 10 months speculating about. Reporters asked about Berlin. Wilson answered about Berlin. Nothing more. Taken together, those 3 moments paint a picture of 2 professional athletes who have consistently chosen restraint over escalation every single time an opportunity to do otherwise presented itself. In an environment where either player could have generated headlines with a single sentence, neither one did.
That absence of escalation is itself part of the record, even if it almost never gets counted as evidence. Set the history aside entirely for a moment, and the roster itself tells a completely separate story, a cleaner one, a basketball one. Wilson is a post player, a two-way interior force whose game is built on physicality, footwork, and positioning in the paint. At the 2022 World Cup, those qualities were the engine of a gold medal run. In international play specifically, her skill set translates directly into FIBA's rules. A wider lane and more zone-heavy defensive schemes reward exactly the kind of interior dominance she provides. Opponents have never found a clean answer for her at that level, and there's no reason to think Berlin will be any different. Clark is a guard. Her value comes from spacing the floor, reading defenses, and creating opportunities for teammates rather than operating inside the paint. Her qualifying tournament averages of 11.6 points and 6.4 assists, the tournament best mark in the latter, suggest a player being deployed at this stage of her international career less as a primary scoring option and more as a floor general, someone whose job is to find the open player, push the pace, and set up the kind of interior finishing that Wilson represents. On paper, before any narrative gets attached to it, this is a complementary pairing. A dominant post scorer and a high assist floor general do not compete for the same shots, the same spacing, or the same role. If anything, the fit is closer to ideal than incidental. Wilson finishes possessions that Clark and the other guards are built to create. The pairing that the internet spent 10 months framing as a potential flashpoint is, from a pure basketball standpoint, exactly the combination a coaching staff designing a championship roster would want. Head coach Kara Lawson's construction, veterans like Wilson, Stewart, and Collier, alongside newcomers like Clark, Buchers, Reese, and Boston, appears built around positional fit and tournament-level execution, not around managing personalities or off-court storylines. A gold medal chase leaves much less room for anything else, and the on-court incentive structure for every player on this roster points in one direction. And yet, the question that the basketball case can't fully answer is the one everyone is actually asking. What is the real dynamic between these two players right now, 10 months after a comment that neither has directly addressed? This is where the record runs out and interpretation has to begin, carefully and without pretending to know what genuinely cannot be known from the outside. One reading of the last 10 months is the straightforward one. Wilson's October comment was never personal in the first place. It was a general statement about league history that traveled through a specific, highly engaged fan base and became something larger than it was ever meant to be. Both players recognized that, moved forward with their careers, and whatever friction existed in public perception simply never existed between them in the same way. Under this reading, the World Cup roster shows exactly what it appears to show. Two elite players selected on merit, whose relationship has always been professional, and whose shared bench in Berlin will be as unremarkable as their shared bench at last year's All-Star game.
A second, more skeptical reading holds that silence is not automatically the same thing as resolution. Professional athletes heading into a national team environment have every incentive to project unity regardless of what they may privately feel. A gold medal run played out under national television cameras leaves very little space for public friction between teammates, whatever exists beneath the surface. Under this reading, the coming weeks in Berlin function less as proof that anything has been settled and more as a controlled, high-stakes environment in which any remaining tension simply has no room to surface. Neither reading can be confirmed by what is publicly available. There is a third possibility worth naming, one that sits somewhere between the two. It may simply be that both players have done what professional athletes are trained to do: compartmentalize.
Treat a single October comment as a closed chapter, not because it was resolved through conversation, apology, or public reconciliation, but because neither player has any real incentive to keep it open. Both have a season, a roster spot, and now a World Cup to focus on. That is not the same as friendship. It is not the same as unresolved conflict either. It is what professional coexistence looks like, when the alternative, public friction ahead of a gold medal chase, serves neither player's interest and the sport as a whole absolutely nobody's. Whether that combination adds up to genuine resolution, professional necessity, or this quieter third possibility is a question this video cannot settle. It may be a question that 5 weeks in Berlin begins to answer. It may be a question that 5 weeks in Berlin never touches at all. Here's what is not a question. The rumor that opened this video, Wilson pulled from the roster, blow up behind closed doors, 2 players unable to coexist, it never happened. The record is clear. USA Basketball's announcement listed both names on August 6th. The roster hasn't changed. No removal took place. What does exist is one comment made in October, 10 months of public silence from both sides, one shared bench at an All-Star game that predated all of it, and now one shared roster heading into Berlin. Social media wanted a feud. The internet wanted a villain. The algorithm rewarded the version of the story where 2 of the most famous players in women's basketball were at war behind closed doors. But the actual record, the documented, verifiable, time-stamped record, tells a far less dramatic and far more human story about 2 professionals who said very little after a moment that could have said everything, and who are now expected to win a gold medal together in front of the world. Whatever happened between them in private, whatever was said or left unsaid in the 10 months that followed, only Wilson and Clark can answer. What isn't open to debate is that the rumor was wrong. The basketball case for their pairing is strong, and Berlin is coming fast. The question now isn't whether they can coexist, they already have. The question is what they can win together, and whether that answer ends up being the only one that matters. If this video changed how you're seeing the story, drop a comment below. Which of the 3 readings makes the most sense to you? And subscribe before Berlin kicks off, because whatever happens on that court, we'll be breaking it down.